Hello, this is Jennifer Marshall. Today it's day 3 of our sourdough starter. So, I just would like to apologize for the background noise. I have at the moment my oven going on, and I unfortunately cannot stop it only because I've got something special baking at the moment, and if I switch off the oven, it will be a hard day's work finished. So unfortunately, I just cannot switch it off. So I apologize for the background noise. So it's day 3 of the sourdough starter, and I have just looked at it, and it's actually, I'm a little bit later than the 24 hours. Normally, I like to feed my starter every 24 hours. So keeping a certain routine, it's actually quite good to keep a routine. However, if you can't keep a routine, that is fine. Like me today, I couldn't because I was, I had to take the kids out, and therefore I am late in my feeding. However, I came back home and my starter, I'll actually uncover it, has really risen. So this is day 3, and yesterday I showed where I was going to place the rubber band. I placed the rubber band at this point, and as you can see, there's been a huge volume rise, and this is the reason why we have a rubber band. So, or else you can even mark it with a marker or something like this. I mean, you don't have to have a rubber band. Just sort of a point of reference. It's quite nice to know where your starter was sitting at when you mixed it initially. So I know that there has been a huge volume rise, which means that my starter has really become active, and fermentation is really well and truly going on at the moment. So there's a lot of bacteria and microbes feeding away, and therefore when they're feeding, there is a lot of rise. It might be the case that you are in day 3 and you will not get this rise, and that is absolutely fine. And that is what I would like to stress. Just because I got the volume rise doesn't mean that you should get the volume rise. Every starter that we make is unique. My flours are different from your flours, and your temperature at your home is different from the temperature in my home. So to expect your starter to behave in exactly the same way like mine is something that we should not worry about. Basically, you should not expect to have the same rise, for example, or else you should not expect that your starter behaves exactly the same way like mine. Because our ambient temperature, our flours, the water that we are using is completely different. And so, like every unique live thing that's out there, your starter is different from mine. I would stress that it would be a good idea to check what type of flours you are using. Sometimes it's very important to use good stone ground flours, for example, are very good. If you can mill your own flours, oh my God, wouldn't that be amazing? However, you know, time permitting, and it's nice to have our own milled flours, but freshly milled flours, but it's not always possible. I would recommend that you buy some really good flours. There are some really good brands out there, and the bread flours are actually the type of flour that you get is also quite important. However, having said that, if you can't afford really, let's say, high quality flours, or for example, these type of flours are not available in your area, which is normal, which can happen, I wouldn't worry so much, because fermentation still takes place with a very basic flour. You shouldn't worry about it. I'm just kind of stating that it is good when you make bread to check your flours and to start learning about the grains that you are using. If you feel that you've been feeding your starter for a long time and there's not been so much rise, I would suggest to, for example, add a little bit of rye flour. The rye grain does love to ferment, and so it accelerates fermentation, and it helps also with getting that fermentation going. So what do I do? Because I have this big rise in my sourdough starter, what I'll do is this. I will mix it. First of all, I'll give it a good mix. because the texture at the top will be a little bit different from the texture at the bottom, and therefore mixing it is good. The other thing is there also might be in your starter a film of liquid on top. This is nothing to worry about. It's basically the starter is telling you, I am hungry. And what you should do is just mix that liquid into your starter and feed it again. Or, for example, discard and feed. Never worry about the liquid. The only thing I would worry about is if, for example, there is mold or there is, even discoloration is not always a bad sign. Some discoloration is okay. What would worry me mostly is, for example, if it's moldy, then, I'm not very keen on using that starter. I would much rather if I start again and start afresh. So I will give my starter a good mix. It's very nice and lovely and bubbly, actually. It's very, very active. And what I will do out of the starter is this. I'm going to take 100 grams of my starter and place it in a new jar. And so this is what I will now use as my feeding. I've already switched on my measuring scales, and I will take 100 grams of starter. Oh, I've taken a little bit too much. Let me, just a second. Let me take out 30 grams out of this. Okay. I still need to take another 15 grams away. Okay. So I'm taking 100 grams of this starter, okay, and feeding it. I'm taking 100 grams of my original starter, placing it in a new jar, and feeding it again with 100 grams of flours. In my case, I'm feeding 50 grams of white flour and 50 grams of whole grain flour, sorry. And to this, I am feeding 100 grams of tepid water. I've already measured my water before I started filming, and give this starter a good mix. So unfortunately, with this starter, with this discard, now this will be my discard because I've taken 100 grams out of this jar. Unfortunately, with this discard, I cannot use it. It's my first discard, and it has absolutely no function at all. It basically has no properties, no beneficial properties at all. And so I will have to, unfortunately, throw it away. And I'll probably be doing that for the next 2 or 3 feeds, only so that I need to strengthen my starter. And I also need to make sure that my starter is well and truly active. And what I will also do is I will take my rubber band and place it on my new jar, because this will be my next main starter until tomorrow, and we shall see what will happen tomorrow. I'd be very happy if there is another similar rise to what happened today. And so I give this a good mix. Make sure that all your flours are well incorporated. I have another spoon today so that it's a clean spoon, so that I don't have to touch my other starter with my hands, with my bare hands. And once again, I've marked where my starter is sitting. It's a measuring jug, so I also know where it's sitting. And tomorrow I'll cover it as well, by the way. Always let it breathe. Make sure that your starter is breathing. So cover it with a simple cloth. It needs oxygen. And keep it in a warm place. So a couple of tips. If you are finding that your starter is taking too long to ferment or to rise, keep it in a warm place. Check your ambient temperature. Is the ambient temperature too cold? If it's too cold, move it to a warmer temperature. Microbes love warmth. When there is a lot of warmth, microbes will feed at a faster pace, and there will be more fermentation. The other possibility I can say is, for example, as I said before, is to use a specific type of flour with it. So rye will help, as I said earlier. Or else you can also add, for example, a small teaspoon of honey. It's just that the sugar will accelerate fermentation. However, I prefer not to use honey if I can avoid it, just so that the starter is in its natural state as possible. Okay, so tomorrow I will come back online. I'll post my next video on day 4, and I'll show you what I will do for my next feed. It probably will be again a feed and a discard and so on, but you know, it's good to sort of have a routine and to understand the steps one has to take with sourdough starter, because I know it can be a little bit confusing at times. Okay, so tomorrow I will come back on and speak about the day 4 sourdough starter. Take care.